Have you ever played a Souls game? I personally have never dove into a Dark Souls, Demon Souls, Sekiro, or even 2022 Game of the Year, Elden Ring. I don't know, I think just hearing that the games are extremely punishing and just overly difficult kind of turned me away. Hey, I mean, I am absolutely down for a challenge, but any game that makes me just want to bash my head against the wall continually just doesn't sound all that fun to me. After all, gaming should be fun, right? So as limited as my experience with Soulsborne games has been, so all the games I mentioned previously that are actually developed by From Software, I have played a few games that are Souls-like, which essentially means that they borrow a lot of elements from the Soulsborne games or stylistically play a lot like them. Some of these elements are an emphasis on environmental storytelling, a clear sense of progression for your character, be that through multiple builds or even just by getting stronger, a checkpoint and quick travel system, being incentivized to run back to your corpse when you die to gather your belongings, and of course, difficult bosses that require the player to get good in order to beat them. You'll have to really get in tune with their attack patterns and figure out the exact moments to dodge, parry, or go on the offensive. Tunic is a game, I think, that contains many of these elements, though I'm not sure how many people might actually classify it as a Souls-like. I think the closest that I've gotten to a pure Souls experience was actually with Carinia Bridge of Spirits on the PS5. I was recommended this game by a friend and I was immediately bought in just because, honestly, it looked like a Pixar movie, so I kind of immediately fell in love with the art style. And the game itself was an amazing time. Until I had 94% trophy completion, and the last remaining one was to beat the game all over again on a Master Spirit Guide difficulty. This was an absolute nightmare. I questioned myself and why I was even doing this multiple times throughout this run because this was so insanely difficult that I was just not having fun at all. I persevered through pure spite and determination, and I felt way more relieved that it was over than proud of the new platinum trophy I earned. I took this as confirmation that I truly was not built different, and maybe I just was not cut out for a Souls game. So a few years pass, and I see this little crab game revealed in a Nintendo Direct. Immediately I was bought in. I love an undersea setting, and you can play as a hermit crab? How neat is that? But it also brandished its Souls-like genre. Sorry, I mean Shells-like, which I had sworn off of since the Carinia debacle. So it finally launched in April, and I decided, come hell or high water, I was gonna give this game and the genre as a whole another try, and even more than that, I was gonna get the platinum trophy on this one, and I'd see where I stood with this genre after the whole experience. So I grabbed my credit card and bought the game. Actually, I bought the Krill plushie from the Aggro Crab store first. I was so certain that I was going to come away loving this game that I just wanted to support the developers and bought this adorable little guy before even touching the game. Number one, he's so freaking cute. Look at him. He's soft, cuddly, and his fork is even magnetized to his claw. You can even remove the tin can shell if you prefer naked Krill. So now, I wasn't alone. I had a little partner to help push me through this journey. Well, aside from my dog Mochi, of course. So with the crab plush and credit card in hand, I bought the game on June 14th and earned the platinum trophy on June 26th. So do I have a renewed interest in Souls-likes? Was this adventure hard as shell, or was it as soft as a soft shell crab? That was horrible. Should this game have been titled Another Crab's Trash instead? I don't even know why I'm attempting to build any form of suspense because I think it's already pretty clear based on the length of this video that I absolutely loved this game. So let me take you through the journey and explain the process of getting each and every trophy in Another Crab's Treasure. As a warning, I'll be discussing the game in its entirety. Boss fights, story beats, gameplay elements. So if you plan to play Another Crab's Treasure at any point, there will be spoilers ahead in this video. The game starts off with this neat Discovery Channel type of introduction to the world, kind of showcasing various undersea creatures and their roles in the ecosystem. I really like this intro. It kind of makes the entire game feel like part of a documentary film. As the footage rises to the surface, it transitions into the in-game engine, taking us to the tide pools, where our adventure truly begins. Our hero Krill is being evicted from his cozy conch shell by the completely legitimate loan shark for not paying his taxes to the Duchy of Slacktide, apparently. So the definitely not toy loan shark snatches his shell and we're left to chase him down and get it back. Right away, I can say for an indie game, I think it looks pretty great visually. I'm a giant fan of the art style in general, but especially so of the cover art and the dialogue portraits as well. On top of that, the game has voice acting, which is certainly not something you'd typically find in an indie game. I wouldn't say that all of it is great, but I do think that there are still a number of really good performances here. So we give chase until the loan shark enters the depths, forcing us to jump in as well, leaving behind the tide pool for the remainder of our adventure. Now that we're in the water, Krill can jump higher and swim a bit, which is kind of like a hover jump. This gives the game a platforming element, which I really enjoyed. Overall, I think he feels pretty great to control. Along the way, too, we'll see many little glimmers that contain equipable items or just straight up trash, like this bread claw. These are each assigned a value and can be sold for microplastics, the game's version of currency. So just digesting that for a second, you can already tell that this game has a lot to say in terms of pollution and the environment as a whole. But the story tackles even more mature themes like destruction of ecosystem, anti-capitalism, income inequality. Pretty deep stuff for a silly little game with a hermit crab wielding a fork. I genuinely did not expect an eat the rich narrative, but hey, I'm here for it. After nearly getting pinched to death by some realistic looking crabs, we make our escape to a purple glow. These are moon snail shells, this game's equivalent to bonfires in Dark Souls. So we'll not only be respawning here each time we face a watery grave, spoiler alert, you'll be looking at this many times, but these also serve as fast travel points and a safe place for you to spend your microplastics to level up Krill. Past the moon snail shell, we'll finally nab our fork and a little ascot made of trash, so we now have a means to defend ourselves. With the prologue now complete, we enter the first major area, the shallows. I will say, I love that this game takes a ton of the conventional tropes of the genre and just completely goes in the other direction with it. The Dark Souls games are pretty dim and dark, but here the seabed is bright and super colorful. Of course, the multicolored microplastics scattered all over the sand like rainbow sprinkles help this cause too. I took a little bit here to get acquainted with the combat system. Krill is able to use standard light attacks in a combo, or a charged attack that is a fair amount slower but does much more damage. His little combat animation of him holding his arms up and snapping his claws is too cute for words, by the way. Defensively, he can hide in his shell, taking no direct HP damage but suffering damage to the equipped shell, and dodge roll to evade incoming attacks. There are many additional abilities and perks Krill can unlock later on, but this is what's available at the outset. The shell mechanic is probably the game's most unique feature. There are 69 different shells, nice, each with a different level of durability, weight, and an ability called a shell spell. The durability will increase the health gauge of the shell, while weight will affect mobility. The most exciting attribute of each shell, well, besides the goofy appearance of course, are the umami abilities. For example, an ice cream cone will freeze enemies, while a soda can will launch fizzy bubble projectiles to damage enemies. These things are everywhere, so it's always fun to switch them out and see what unique ability the shell might have and which best suits your playstyle. And hey, even if its ability isn't for you, it's better than nothing. Krill is substantially weaker without a shell, so you might as well grab one. I also love the Pikmin-like element of being so small in a world that's so big. Seeing everyday objects like a sandal or the sandcastles as massive structures just never gets old to me. After some exploring, we finally reach Slacktide to resolve this mess, where the lobster guards refuse us entry due to Krill's nudity. So they tell us to meet with the captain of the guard to find something to wear. Over by a vending machine, we'll face our first boss of the game, Nephro, Captain of the Guard. First off, the bosses just showcase how clever the developers are. Look how Nephro uses a straw as a sword and a Slurpee cup top as its hilt. It's this use of trash in various ways throughout the game that just constantly impressed me with their creativity. Nephro wasn't too bad, though the first attempt went horribly and I immediately began feeling nervous that I was in over my head. He has a few attacks, a charge, a sword swing, and even a kick if you stand behind him. I was a lot more patient and careful on my third attempt and eventually whittled his health down and was awarded with the first of 33 trophies for defeating him, Captain of the Guard. Upon returning to the castle, the Queen informs us that a platoon went out to recover a shiny object to decorate her castle, so we have our next destination. Before we leave though, we're able to grab the grappling hook and fishing wire, which now allows us to grapple to nets and hooks throughout the sea. In this room, we get our first glimpse of some of the knockoff brands of real-life items. Nothing like a Shuckers Uncrustworthies in my lunchbox with a side of cheesy guns. And who doesn't love to season their crabs with Elden Bay seasoning? You have Mario brand cigarettes, I mean the list goes on and on. My absolute favorite in the game, I swear to God if this isn't butter, I'm seriously going to lose it. That one got a pretty good laugh out of me. Using our new fishing line in the Moon Caves, we make our way to the next boss, the Polluted Platoon Pathfinder. First off, this absolutely insane track is some of the best music in the game. I did not expect a bop with a beat this nasty for a boss this early on, but I am definitely not mad about it. This boss wasn't too difficult. I beat it on only my second try. His attacks with the bottle are pretty easy to see coming and just simply evade with a dodge roll. Trophy 2 out of 33 obtained, Polluted Platoon Pathfinder. Past the boss, we can enter the Moon Snail's domain, an area where you can spend purple crystals on your skill tree. These crystals are gained from defeating gunked enemies, the ones with the purple eyes, or collected from breaking crystals in the overworld. There's 3 distinct paths: the path of the predator, the path of the true hermit, and the path of the crab. Each focuses on increasing his offensive capabilities and further bolstering his defense, evasion, and counterattacking options. There are 3 trophies tied to completing each constellation of the skill tree, which is pretty easy to complete later on. By now, we've also probably found a few equipable sea creatures called stowaways. These are accessory items like mollusks or mussels or sea cucumbers that offer a unique effect or just stat boosts. These were really fun to collect and really powerful once you get a good setup. I rode with Chum, a little fish sidekick that attacks enemies for you, a lamprey which heals krill for each attack dealt, and finally a sea sponge helping to recover MSG with each attack so I could use more of the shell spells. Just another way that you can build krill however you choose. When we make our way back to Slacktide, it's in absolute ruins. All of the structures have been destroyed and all of the guards and crabs have gone mad. After fighting your way through the castle, we finally reach Duchess Magista, who has also lost it, explaining how worthless she and the kingdom are and ordering its destruction. Oh, and she's also vomiting black sludge. You know, just your average crab stuff. Now, this guy was not supposed to be a part of this fighter cutscene. He's just being silly. And it's with the Duchess that I hit my first roadblock. It didn't take that long. The developer's creativity also continues here. She wields a loose leaf T-ball as a ball and chain type weapon. Looking back at the footage, her attacks do seem surprisingly telegraphed, but I was having a really hard time navigating it all. I think the fight definitely would not have been as difficult if she wasn't puking up all the black sludge, which will slowly sap your health, so I was really focusing on that. After about 36 minutes of attempts, I really started to nail the timing of her swings, and I was finally able to dodge roll my way to victory, earning trophy number 3, Tyrant of Slacktide. In addition to a nice bunch of microplastics, we've also earned our first adaptation, special abilities that use umami power like shell spells. This one in particular, Royal Wave, essentially lets you use the Duchess's Claw ability to swipe at multiple enemies. Any foe hit by this will also take increased damage for a short while, so I loved using this against bosses. There are plenty more of these to earn, but this one wound up being one of my absolute favorites to use. Immediately after the fight, we're rudely interrupted by the lone shark, who once again runs away with our shell, this time to a place called New Carinia. On the way there, we're greeted by ketchup packet flags and a ton of colorful platforms of coral and other trash like these traffic signs. This was one of my favorite areas strictly in that it was pretty stunning, aside from all of the, pollution. There's a bunch of relatively annoying enemies on this path though, like the seahorses that shoot these projectiles that make you go flying. Thanks to their help though, I was actually able to nab trophy number 4, the You Fell Off trophy, which you get for falling off a cliff to your death. Nice! Once we do some Sonic the Hedgehog shit and reach New Carinia, I was once again blown away by the devs' creativity. The city is even more colorful and imaginative than the coral reef area we just explored. Dominoes make up stairs, and playing cards their buildings' doors. A giant and unnecessarily long CVS receipt makes a bridge between areas. Toilet brushes make up their foliage, while cocktail umbrellas are their actual patio umbrellas. It is genius stuff. New Carcinia's residents are the remaining key figures in this game's story. There's Firth, a fellow hermit crab and aspiring businessman who kind of plays the foil to Krill. There's Conch, the old hermit who's kind of the town's historian running its museum. Nema, the motherly and kind crab donning an orange peel wig and a silica gel packet dress. And Chitin, the last lobster guard from Slacktide who encourages Krill along his journey. New Carinia also shines light on the capitalism theme, with the well-to-do haves on the ritzy, colorful part of town called the upper crust, and the struggling have-nots in the shady lower crust, the lower income part of town with shabbier buildings, with less light and menial jobs. In the upper crust, you're able to buy new shells and outfits. Love that indie games and even Mr. Krabs is referenced, and in doing so, we received trophy number 5 in Good Claws for purchasing shell insurance. This will have your shell automatically respawn with you upon each death. Buying any shell from this shop will automatically insure it. Back down in the lower crust, you're able to upgrade your fork with silver relics, which are keys found in the overworld. Now this will increase your fork's damage and change its appearance. You can also buy and sell stowaways with Nema's children at her bar, and sell trash for microplastics to Prawnathin, a shrimp who's somehow in possession of your shell and will only sell it for 999,999,999 microplastics, and just so happens to have the shark grabber toy hidden behind his shop. You're telling me this puny shrimp is the loan shark? Trash suddenly begins raining onto the town, and down comes a Captain Crunch cereal box with one of those kids' activity treasure maps on the back, somehow starting our quest for an unknown treasure. Before embarking, we're met with two of the game's central villains. Roland, a venture capitalist and CEO of Shellfish Corp. Pretty much your average CEO, exploiting employees with terrible jobs and horrific working conditions, all while he gets filthy rich at their expense. Then there's his right-hand man, Inkerton, who seems to play the enforcer role. Being the greedy crabtalist that he is, Roland cannot let Krill or the folks of New Carcinia have that treasure, and so a race for it ensues. But in order to find the treasure, we first need to get the missing pieces of the cereal box's treasure map. While not all of the characters are incredibly deep, they're really memorable and distinct with great designs and interesting motivations. I think this is a good moment to emphasize just how well written the game is. I mean, number one, it is hilarious, but it also uses a ton of nautical puns like cod instead of god and shell instead of hell, and so forth and so on. With all of the major players now met, Prawnathin agrees to trade Krill's shell back to him in exchange for this mystical treasure should Krill find it. With the next arc of our adventure laid out, we just earned trophy number 6. The hunt begins. Now, it was at this point that I realized there was actually a boss I saw in the shallows but ran away from and forgot about. With some newfound confidence from my battle with the Duchess, I figured I'd give him a shot. The Royal Shell Splitter has a bicycle lock guillotine. How sick is that? On top of that, he shares the same boss theme with the polluted platoon Pathfinder, so I certainly didn't mind jamming out to that again while I fought this guy. I heavily relied on the new jump dodge ability that I got for Krill, and he gave me next to no trouble. We easily just earned trophy number 7, Royal Shell Splitter. Minus my small hurdle with the Duchess, this was going pretty smoothly. Maybe this wasn't going to be as bad as I thought. What a naive thought that was. You see, our next destination is the Grove, but to get there, you have to travel the Sands Between, which is apparently an Elden Ring reference that completely went over my head, but I love how on the nose that is. The trouble is, there's talk of some man-eating beast, or I guess crab-eating beast, who wanders the sands. Apparently, to avoid him picking up your scent and safely travel to and from the Grove, you have to walk the path along the life preservers. Now, the stubbornness in me was really enjoying the exploration and collecting aspect of the game, so I didn't want to be limited. So I thought, let me just see, how bad could he possibly be? Turns out, pretty damn bad. To be fair, the game makes it pretty clear that you're not supposed to engage with him just yet. First off, this dude is disgusting. Brother has a fork and knife strapped to his claws. You'll probably find out why multiple times like I did. And a deranged looking eye and barnacles all over him. So while I knew that I shouldn't be fighting him, my first couple attempts went okay enough to warrant trying again and again and again and again and again and again. The failed attempts actually did not bother me nearly as much as the runbacks to my junk did. That got really old. Now, Pagaris has a lot of combos that just felt really difficult to read at first, but, you know, after 26 or so tries, you start to get used to them. I have a very dodge roll heavy playstyle. Maybe it's my Kingdom Hearts roots coming out, but it is just not feasible to evade every attack. It was at this moment that I became one with the crab. I started actually defending using my shell to block attacks, and it made my life so much easier. After an hour and 12 minutes of absolute suffering, I finally got him down to like 0.01% and then died. It was a sad little crab. But I finished him on the very next attempt, so Pagaris the Ravenous, Menace of the Sands Between was no more, and trophy number 8, the Ravenous, was mine. And our first, which I guess should be the second or maybe even the third, piece of the map. This fight kind of represented a fork in the road for me. Now, on one hand, this was far and away the most difficult boss in the game for me. While I still died like plenty of times to standard enemies and maybe a handful of times on the remaining bosses, I felt every boss after this one got significantly easier. Be it the combination of getting good, leveling up my stats, or new adaptations and stowaways, I had a much more relaxed time with pretty much every subsequent boss. And you know what? This boss that plagued me for well over an hour was probably the most memorable boss in the game for me. I suppose that says a lot about the satisfaction that comes with defeating a truly difficult Soulsborne or Souls-like boss. Am I starting to get it? Do I get it? The funny thing is, there's a ton of accessibility options to make your journey as easy as you want it to be. Like automatically collecting your junk if you don't feel like running back, or if it's out of reach. But the most notorious is the gun. I remember seeing in trailers that you could literally give Krill a gun, and after big crab bosses, I just wanted to try it out. And I absolutely blasted this poor crab away, hilariously earning me trophy number 9, This Kills the Crab. Of course, this was pretty much the last time in the run that I used it, but it is really funny and a great option for anyone who just wants to experience the story. With the Sands Between now completely free, I took my time getting to the Grove. There was a neat reference to Pizza Tower with a Peppino's pizza box. There's a ton of indie references in this game, which is amazing. But mostly, I found a lot of these sandworms that really irritated me, so I just decided to proceed with the story. After seeing some familiar faces on the way in, we get our first look at the Grove. It's a pretty forested area with a lot of grappling hooks to get around, and even more annoying enemies. These crabs using toothpick arrows are so insanely accurate and do a ton of damage, so I just found those really irritating. After wading through kelp and other seaweeds, I found a clearing with the next boss, the diseased lycanthrope. This is probably another Dark Souls reference, isn't it? I think he's a big fish with gunk all over him and a watering can on his head. Anyway, he can spit out gunked crab minions and also inhale you for big damage. I had recently upgraded Krill with the Scrap Hammer ability, allowing you to use a charged attack on any shell you find lying around to turn your weapon into a hammer, which I used to great effect on this boss. Look at that damage! Overall, this guy's moves are pretty easy to see coming and dodge, and it makes for an easy trophy number 10, Diseased Lycanthrope. I was rewarded with the Chum Stowaway too, which I mentioned earlier. This guy really is relentless, and he does a fair amount of continual damage to bosses, so he was never unequipped for the rest of the journey. I absolutely love him. Making our way further through the Grove, I saw a waterfall, and I have played way too many Zelda games to not see what's behind it. And wouldn't you know, you fall down into a hidden boss room. This guy is almost a carbon copy of the polluted Platoon Pathfinder, the difference being Noodlehead here has a pot lid that he uses as a shield and tongues as his weapon. And I got killed several times in pretty quick succession by this guy. Looking back, I was just playing really badly and just not at all waiting for openings. His unblockable move is actually grabbing you with the tongs and almost tennis serving you away. I did start to nail his timing though, and actually my newfound pal Chum laid the final blow on Curdled Carbonara Connoisseur, giving us trophy number 11 of the same name. Pushing onward and upward! We finally make our way to a ship with sushi rolls all around. Here we have one of the most creative bosses in the entire game. Hekeia, Intimidation Crab. This guy is a samurai crab who uses chopsticks as a sword and the wrapper as his sheath. This guy wasn't too bad. Honestly, my first handful of attempts, I got him down to just a few hits left. The first half of the boss is a cakewalk. His attacks are all pretty slow and pretty predictable. At about half health though, he'll break his chopsticks apart and adopt a much more chaotic dual wielding style, which was a neat change of pace. After about 6 tries, I was able to down him on lucky number 7, using a trusty sushi roll hammer to dispatch him. Fitting. We earned another silver relic for upgrading our fork later, and our first, well I guess technically second, piece of the map. More importantly though, trophy number 12, Intimidation Crab. Chitin appears and lets us know that Hekeia is no match for the true master of this area, and that he's just a bit further in the village sanctum. Well, okay. After going a decent ways further through the village gates, you'll find a colorful clearing with dead crab shells everywhere. Pretty fun to crawl around like a true crab though, not gonna lie. Up ahead is a mantis shrimp boss, Grovekeeper Topoda. Can I just say, I love how so many of these enemies just look like true-to-life sea creatures, you know, despite wielding trash as weapons. This guy truly earned the title of Master. He's pretty tough and incredibly fast. Towards the end of the fight, he'll begin teleporting and doing this mantis punch, which I actually had a lot of trouble dealing with at first. But it's actually not super difficult to dodge. After several attempts, I was finally able to defeat the mantis shrimp, earning our 13th trophy, Grovekeeper. In addition to that, he teaches us his Mantis Punch adaptation, which does unbelievably high damage, but it also lets us access new areas in the overworld. So now we can punch through any glowing purple blocks like this, which can also reveal shortcuts and hidden items. Since the Grovekeeper wasn't truly evil, he'll also let you upgrade your adaptations at the cost of purple crystals, increasing their effectiveness, adding perks to them, or just lowering their ability costs. At this point, I went and spent some of the umami crystals earned by the previous 2 bosses and was able to complete the offensive part of the skill tree, earning trophy number 14, Way of the Predator. After heading back to the Captain Crunch map, we're told that our next part of the map should be in Flotsam Vale, which is Roland's Shellfish Corp company town. Now, if this area is any indication of what type of operation he has running here, yeah, these poor crabs have it really bad. There are a few new enemies here too, one being these things. I don't know, they kind of look like the lycanthrope we fought, just without all the sludge. And these shrimp that shoot shotgun shells, which is actually pretty great. Once we reach a circular pier section, there's another crab boss akin to the polluted Platoon Pathfinder or the Carbonara guy we fought, except this time he's from Splatoon. Other than his large paint roller, he attacks pretty similar to the other guys. I like how the broom on his head makes him look like he's wearing a Trojan helmet. I don't know, I just thought that was funny. Just steer clear of his paint roller as best as you can, or you'll get gunked and have your HP start draining. I don't know if mine glitched out a little bit, but he kind of just ran around in circles for almost half the fight, which made it pretty easy for me. Anyway, he's not too difficult, and you'll earn trophy number 15, Scuttling Sludge Steamroller. Further on, you'll enter a little cave where we fight the Ceviche sisters, 2 gun-wielding shrimp with tortilla chips or Doritos on their heads. This fight wasn't too bad. I kind of bum-rushed one of them, and when that one was taken out, the other one was just child's play. In doing so, we earned the Bubble Bullet adaptation, the final piece of the map, and trophy number 16, Ceviche sisters. Once the map is complete, Roland steals the entire cereal box map and sails off on his barge to salvage the treasure somewhere in the slurry. So we need to head back to Flotsam Vale and use the only remaining ship to go after him. But it won't sail without power. So we need to find a way to charge it, which we'll do in Scuttleport, another workplace for Shellfish Corp. After getting past the pill organizer locker room and becoming a union worker, we begin making our way through Scuttleport and its series of magnet-based puzzles. It's pretty cool. You have to equip metal shells and hide in them to cross large gaps and progress further through the area. This is pretty much the only area in the game that had a puzzle-like element to it, so this was pretty fun to explore. First, we'll show up a number of times playing the good guy, yet consistently making excuses on Roland's behalf. There's a ton of electric enemies which make this place pretty tough, all leading up to its boss, an electric eel, Volti the Accumulator. Now this was a really fun fight. I loved how she uses her electric abilities to power various appliances. She uses a toaster to shoot bread out, which you can use as platforms to attack her, a hairdryer, and oh my god, did they really just do that? I was legitimately dying at this. I did not expect that. This fight was not difficult, but my god was it entertaining. Trophy number 17, the Accumulator earned. In addition to that, we learned the extremely broken Electrocute adaptation. This damages and stuns enemies and was a godsend for some of the later boss fights in this game. It also lets us access hidden areas by electrocuting these little jumper cable crabs in the overworld. More importantly though, this lets us power the boat and sail after Roland. Before that though, I spent some more crystals to earn trophy number 18, the Way of the Hermit, for completing that branch of the skill tree. Once the ship is powered, everyone discusses what they do once they find the treasure. Interestingly, Firth says he'd give it all to charity or split it with everyone. Maybe he really isn't such a bad guy. Krill actually decides he wouldn't. He needs it to get his shell back. There's not much time to think on that though, because we've found Roland's ship, which is actually a big old pinball machine. Pretty sweet actually. Once on board, it's finally time for the Shellfish Corp's kingpin to get his own hands dirty. While Inkerton handles all of our allies, it's time for a one-on-one with Roland. I love how he uses an Allen wrench as a cane. Sometimes he'll roll into a ball and make use of the pinball setting, which is super cool. I wound up relying really heavily on Electrocute and the new Skedaddle skill that I learned, which is essentially a backstep. This made for really easy counterattacks on Roland. I beat it on only my second try, but the build-up, the atmosphere, and the fight itself was really memorable. For this, we earned trophy number 19, Venture Crabbalist. Despite being defeated, he still hauls up the treasure before Krill goes absolutely postal. Great pun here, by the way. Attacking Roland and effectively sinking the pinball machine barge into the depths of the ocean with everyone still aboard. A simple and pretty heartfelt cutscene then plays while Krill is still unconscious. It's just a series of images showing baby Krill maturing and how the shell has always protected him through thick and thin. This gives you some indication as to just why his shell is so precious to him. And it was just a better cutscene than it had any right being. A depressed and guilt-ridden Krill can barely even hold his fork up as we awaken in the unfathomed, the dark reaches of the sea where lost souls go. Is anyone else still alive? We make our way to a glowing light where we find the treasure we've worked all game to find. It's full of $100 bills, but as a royally pissed off Firth explains, it's totally useless to all of them. I would gladly take it off their hands though. Eventually we'll get overwhelmed by a bunch of enemies, but ultimately saved by Nema. What an angel. This area is incredibly dark and hard to navigate, but there are glow sticks that can help light the path. You're also able to find this really sick Exiled Flame outfit, which someone helps illuminate the area too. There's some really neat retro stuff down here like CD drive shortcuts, old computer mice, and an N64 cartridge shell. There's some really sinister voices coming from these purple wisp type things too. Whose words are these? When we finally reach the crashed pinball machine, Conch explains that there might be another mythical treasure that can get us all out of this mess. But it looks like there's actually a fast travel point ahead. And wow, it's actually a surprise hermit crab boss. I absolutely loved this twist. Petrock, the false moon, isn't an overly difficult boss, and while it's not quite a mirror match, he can parry attacks, and it's always cool to just fight someone who's a little more on your level. For defeating Petrock, we earn another adaptation called the Snail Sanctum, which allows us to summon an ethereal shell if we ever lose ours, and earned trophy number 20. We can now actually use his shell as a checkpoint and shellport to the other locations. Before moving on with the story though, I went back and fought a boss that I completely missed earlier, the Consortium. This disgusting heap of crab and tentacle mess is locked in a crab trap and also has a gun for some reason, so you pretty much have to attack each rope that's holding the trap shut. It makes for a pretty fun yet absolutely revolting boss. Pretty straightforward, but we actually earned a few trophies here. For one, you get the standard "You Beat the Boss" trophy, aptly named the Consortium. But we also earned an adaptation called Tactical Tentacle. This summons a spectral tentacle to attack alongside Krill, and this is a little bit broken too. Since this was the final adaptation in the game, we earned trophy number 22, Well Adapted. I'm going to go ahead and complete the skill tree right here and earn trophy number 23, Way of the True Crab. We now have access to the full breadth of Krill's abilities. Pressing on in the Unfathomed, we reach the Abyssal Plains, a thankfully more lit section. Something that's both hilarious and terrifying are these giant spider crabs that shoot lasers. If you can get underneath them, they're pretty easy to beat, but ugh, yeah, they're creepy, man. After dodging laser after laser, we walk onto what appears to be the skeletal remains of a large sea creature. Yeah, this has boss fight written all over it. Or inked all over it, you could even say. It's finally time to put an end to Inkerton. But first, he puts an end to Roland for getting a little bit too mouthy. Death by Party Popper. Good riddance. Inkerton savagely mocks Krill, who at the time was cosplaying as the Cult of the Lamb, and the battle begins. Inkerton has a crab claw cracker befitting to his crab hunter moniker, and then a party popper for long range damage. I honestly beat him on my first attempt, so I didn't break much of a sweat on this guy. He did get me with his crab cracker move though once, which was pretty cool to see. For beating him, we earned trophy number 24, Crab Hunter. Once Inkerton was dispatched, it was finally time to meet back up with Conch, who explains that the perfect whirl must be in the old ocean, traveling further down into this majestic whitewashed area for the game's final zone. White coral, white sands, white-ish water. It's very melancholy, but it's also kind of beautiful and serene. I do love that some of this zone's common shells are toilet paper and a scrub daddy sponge. Of course, these shells, along with detergent caps, kind of paint a clear picture as to why everything is bleached. Eventually we reach some castle ruins, and we come to find out that this was Carcinia. So New Carcinia was not just a play on, like, New York, it actually was the second attempt at establishing a Carcinia city. Old Man Conch was actually from this original city too. Some pretty cool lore there, actually. After a ton of platforming and grappling and climbing, I finally found the game's final stainless relic, so we can fully upgrade the fork, earning us trophy number 25, Make It Shine. Look at that gold! Love that thing. Getting back to the castle, there was this long platforming challenge where you're rewarded at the very end with the Dark Souls Knight helmet. It's a super adorable shell, and I love that Aggro Crab wore their heart on their sleeve with this game. No hiding at all what inspired them, which is so cool. Plus, it gave us trophy number 26, Shells-like. Appropriate. Getting back on track, it's finally time to face this kingdom's ruler. Can we just take a second to admire the snow globe shell though? I love that one especially. Kamcha, the Bleached King, is a great looking boss. For one, he's bleached from all the pollution and has barnacles, so you can tell he's kind of ancient and weathered. But going with the whole bathroom theme here, he's wearing shower curtain hooks as jewelry and wields a toilet brush as his royal scepter. I don't think that this was supposed to be a challenging encounter, but I kind of just wailed on him while he pounded the ground and he went down without much of a fight at all. Kind of anticlimactic. Well, trophy number 27 the Bleached King earned. Except he molts his shell, revealing his red body underneath, and he puts in dentures, which is horrifying and kind of hilarious. He was a bit more challenging and aggressive in this phase, but I think at this point I was just leveled up enough to where he really wasn't much of a threat to me. I do love this encounter overall, and the fake out to a phase 2 fight was awesome. Trophy number 28, Kamcha Reborn. We're almost to the finish line. With Kamcha's demise, the porcelain throne he sits upon opens, literally taking us to the true bottom of the drain. Here lies a ton of discarded crab husks and some other ruins, but a spectral blue light guides us further and the perfect whirl is in sight. Krill and Conch prepare to use the whirl to set things right when he is killed in an instant by a clearly possessed chitin. It turns out that those voices that we heard in the Unfathomed were actually from this creature, Praia Dubia, which is actually based on a real-life creature that can be up to 160 feet in length. Creepy. Chitin's possessor is almost like the collective voice of the ocean, raging against the trash and the pollution that has in part destroyed it, and the underwater society and economy that accepts it. Consumed and corrupted by this anger, Praia Dubia wants to use the perfect whirl to bring about the destruction of the ocean and an end to all undersea life. She's the source of the gunk virus, and that was all a means to execute her plan to end everything. A spectral, larger-than-life evil truly makes for a great final boss. I just kept grappling to her, and this phase went over pretty quickly. Praia Dubia then discards Chitin, and we now have to fight her directly. Funnily enough, I must have used the mantis punch ability a little too close to the cutscene because this mantis arm kind of glitched out and was stuck to me for the remainder of the fight. It's just goofy looking. Honestly though, I had no idea what I was doing here, and it didn't seem like any of my attacks were doing anything, so I believe she pretty much had to end herself. With each attack she threw, her health dwindled a little bit, and I think the goal here is just to survive. With one final agonizing scream, Praia Dubia is no more, earning trophy number 29, the Ocean's Agony. Before we enter the point of no return though, there was one final optional trophy to get, Shell Seeker, for equipping all shells. I missed 2 shells along the way, one being this sock hidden in the Unfathomed, pretty well might I add, and somehow I missed this gotcha ball at the mouth of the drain. I was confused as to why the trophy wasn't popping when I equipped it, but it turns out I actually had to equip the gun one last time and then enter the moonsnail shell. So with all 69 shells collected, and now trophy number 30 in hand, it was finally time to complete the game. A mortally weakened Chitin takes responsibility for murdering Conch despite being possessed, though she believes the ocean can still be saved. Krill, anxious to save her, is about to put on the perfect whirl shell when Firth appears out of nowhere and claims it for himself, proclaiming that he'll be the savior of New Carinia. We give chase, which brings us to the surface, to the trash island or garbage patch that consistently drops trash onto all of our characters. I took a minute here to just admire the clouds and the golden hour lighting here. It's actually insanely beautiful. The teleporting seagulls, though, were pretty funny and kind of immersion breaking. Speaking of funny, I forgot that I was above water for a second and couldn't do the jump swim anymore, so I immediately just fell right back in. When we reach Firth, he lays out his 3-step plan to cover New Carinia in trash, eventually trying to make it slightly more sustainable. Not the best plan. For as much as he claims that he wants to be charitable and help others, he so desperately wants to be the new Roland, and he's so ignorant to anything other than his view. Clearly, he has a god complex as well. Unrelated, but it took me literally the entire game to realize that Firth was wearing a credit card as a vest. Maybe Praia Dubia's words struck a chord in Krill, but he realized that he's been angry, and maybe that anger is what he needs to finally create a change. Looks like we're in for a true mirror match for the grand finale. God, I love that. I also got absolutely blasted in about 6 seconds flat my first attempt. I love how the simple things show just how contrasting these characters are. For one, their colors being red and blue literally show the contrast between them, and Firth wields a spoon while Krill uses a fork. Fitting that a clearly privileged Firth would have a silver spoon, by the way. These devs really thought of everything, didn't they? The fact that he has the same claw snapping animation and can use charged attacks, adaptations like the Royal Wave, defend in his shell, and even parry makes this a true and even mirror match. It is super well done. Towards the end of this part, he'll actually start creating a giant sword of trash, which you'll want to avoid because it hits pretty hard. After a relatively straightforward phase 1, the perfect world begins to crack from our fight as Firth channels more of its power, summoning tentacles and becoming the avatar of waste. He has some new tricks here, like the urchin toss ability and summoning currents of water that can kind of toss you around. After depleting his health, the whirl goes flying as he begs you not to put it on. The defeat of Firth delivers trophy number 31, Avatar of Waste. Krill's anger leads him to shout one of the all-time puns from the game, in addition to landing an anime punch from hell. Unfortunately destroying the perfect world though. When Krill awakens, Trash Island truly did blanket New Carinia in trash, to a mixed reception by its people. As we make our way through though, we see Firth get flattened by a boot liqueur bottle. Another insanely clever joke here. Oh well, RIP buddy. We then see Nema, who delivers a pretty somber message. While some crabs are excited by all of the trash they can now use, it's obviously going to lead to more of them getting gunked sooner. We then see a homeless or shellless crab who leaves Krill with some words of wisdom too. In short, telling him not to take his shell or anything he has for granted. Krill begins to question what this journey was all for, and what will he do now? Eventually, we reach the pawn shop where Pronathan awaits. Refusing to give Krill his shell, the game prompts you to do something that you have wanted to do all game. With a single extremely satisfying blow, we watch Pronathan's lifeless body drift away and climb back into the shell that we worked so incredibly hard to earn back. This earned us the final trophy of Another Crab's Treasure, finishing what I started before the fully carcinized platinum trophy also pops. We got Krill's shell back, and we platinumed a Souls-like game. All that's left now is to see how this story wraps up. The narrator from the very beginning lays out the uncertain future for this tale's characters. And as for Krill, it looks like he travels the sea defending others in search for his own purpose. But his shell is gone. After that long and arduous journey solely for the sake of reclaiming his shell, he gave it to the homeless crab that we just spoke to, someone he ultimately feels needs it more. I've seen some people really annoyed that he just gave it away after the whole game, but I don't know, I found it really emotional and pretty touching actually. As the credits roll, an acoustic track called The Mess I Made perfectly captures the feel of this bittersweet ending. I actually think this song is incredibly good. A keeper for sure. Blown away is an understatement. I was absolutely in love with this game from start to finish. I mean, it is absolutely overflowing with personality, charm, creativity, originality, and it does really well to honor the games that inspired it, as well as shining light on other indie games, which is so cool. It has a number of mature themes from ecological to economic, and it really leaves the player with something to chew on and think about well after their playthrough. I mean, at least I still am. I don't know. I truly can't wait to see what Aggro Crab develops next. I, for one, certainly would not be mad if this game was a one-off, but hey, I would more than welcome a sequel. It seems like the ending was pretty open, so who knows? But maybe they can start by releasing this game physically, because I would love to add that to my own mountain of trash. This game might have changed my perspective on Soulsborne or Souls-like games. I don't know, I really did enjoy the challenge, and maybe that's ultimately what makes these games so satisfying and addictive in the first place. Maybe the most exciting thing of this whole experience was knowing now that it might have opened my horizons to new games that I never thought I'd play. Maybe that was the treasure all along. If you've watched up until this point, I want to thank you guys so much for sticking around. I know this was a really long one, but I had such a blast doing this, and I thought it was pretty neat to see someone who's never played a Souls-like game struggle his way through one. And ultimately, this game was amazing and deserves to be talked about, so I really wanted to make a video on this. So I wanted to thank you guys so much again for watching. If you want to go ahead and pick this game up, I highly encourage you to do so. I think it's only $29. Hey, and if you don't want to play the game for yourself, and this video was enough for you, go ahead and buy a Krill plush. I think they're restocking them later this year. An indie dev like Aggro Crab can use all of the support they can get. I mean, you saw what happened to the developers of Hi-Fi Rush. So thank you guys so much again for watching. Make sure to hit that like button if you like this video, and hit subscribe so that you're in the know for all of my future uploads. Make sure to pick up your trash if you go to the beach, take some trash out of the ocean, and be good. Bye-bye.